Welcome to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. Well, today we're going to share an incredible story. You definitely want to listen to this podcast because I am here with Tamara. She's one of students in our short-term rental profit academy, and she got sued by her Airbnb guest. Yes, you're not hearing this wrong. She got sued by her Airbnb guest 3 years ago. It was an insane nightmare that she had to go through. The case was settled recently, and she is now willing to share the story on this podcast. So I'm super excited to hear the story. It's totally crazy. I already know part of the story, but not all the details. So Tamara, well, first of all, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Not the best topic, but still.
Oh, it's it's an intriguing topic. It's something that obviously nobody wants to go through, but I think it's definitely good to understand the process because this could happen to any one of us, right?
Absolutely.
But before,
I suppose if you live where I live, in California, it's probably not a matter of if, it's just probably when.
So before we dive into that, you are the founder of Swag Hospitality, short-term rental management company in Los Angeles. Tell us a little bit more about your business.
So we have 6 residences, always looking for more, primarily in Los Angeles County, but primarily in Long Beach, California, which is a wonderful city that's halfway between downtown LA and halfway between Orange County. So for folks that are coming in, we have a lot of people that do what's called the Golden Triangle, which is San Francisco, Los Angeles, Las Vegas. So we have a lot of folks that come in and do that. Or we did pre-COVID and hopefully will again soon. We're really centrally located. So for people who want to get to Venice Beach or Santa Monica, then Laguna Beach, Disneyland, Hollywood, it's very centrally located. You're just kind of right in the middle of all of that. So we're fortunate. And we are in what is now a short-term rental friendly city, where it is legalized and regulated and transient occupancy taxes are collected. So it's a good place, I think, to do business.
Awesome. Well, and to start on a positive note, you just told me that you are crushing it right now. You got a ton of bookings coming in, right?
We do. It's really exciting. So as I said, I'm not one of the bigger players. We like to say boutique. But yes, so we just moved tiers, out of the red tier, out of the purple tier into the red tier, out of the red tier into the orange tier, and headed quickly for yellow. And it really, that along with the announcement of Disneyland, giving and publicizing their reopening date of April 30th, has kind of immediately, as I said earlier, like flipped a switch in terms of not the number of bookings, but the time frame. We had been really fortunate during COVID to have traveling nurses, frontline workers, parents whose kids were stranded at Cal State Long Beach, things like that. So we booked between 88 and 92%, with the exception of March and April of 2020, but hitting May all the way through. But the bookings were always within a 2-week window. Nothing outside of 14 days. And then with the announcement of Disneyland and moving into the orange tier, it has become a very different profile in terms of who's booking and their lead time. We have bookings into 2022 now, which if someone had told me a month ago, I would have been shocked to hear. So I'm really encouraged, and I hope that it's that we stay on this trajectory because it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure with the opening up of Disney World, you're going to get a lot of guests. So if someone's listening to this podcast right now and wants to go to Disney World, where can they find your units?
So they can find us at swaghospitality.com. That's SWAG. Or you can find us on Airbnb. We are exclusively on Airbnb outside of our direct bookings. And some of that reason, as we've talked about in our classes, I do have about half of our properties are Airbnb plus residences, and that obviously limits you from being listed on other OTA platforms.
That's right. And since you're in our student group, guests are guaranteed a 5-star hospitality experience, of course.
Absolutely,
right?
They are, without question, undoubtedly. All joking aside, though, I will say for anyone listening, I think this situation that we're about to dive into could have potentially, knock on wood, turned out differently for me if I hadn't been in strap up. If I didn't have my corporate structure set up the way that it was, if I didn't have the right insurance. And those are things that I think are always on someone's to-do list as long as you know about them, but sometimes get pushed down your to-do list. And I was in Strappa from day one, and we had accountability and check-in lists, and the corporate structure and insurance and things like that were top of mind, and I had in place prior to this. So I'm really grateful.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, happy to have you in the group. You've always been providing a lot of value to the other students as well. So, but let's dive in. Okay. So this story is really, really, really crazy, but I'll just let you tell it. What happened?
So I had a guest who I think she had booked for 2 nights in one of our Airbnbs, and she was actually in transit. She had attended a wedding in the state of Hawaii, and she was traveling back to her home state, and they were overnighting here for a couple of days. She arrived at my property right at check-in time, which at that time I actually had a 2 p.m. check-in, so it was pretty early. Got here, it was she and her husband, and they actually had another guest with them at the time that had come back from the wedding with them, and they were taking back to their home. Came in the house, dropped off their bags, we met them, greeted them, which we sometimes do if that seems like the right thing to do, and then they headed out, and they returned to the residence later that evening, and she entered through the walkway, came into the residence, apparently left something in her car and went back out. So it was her 4th trip, it was her 4th trip up and down that pathway. And it had become dark by that point in time, and she was heading out to her car, and there were some children playing basketball in the street. And I believe, supposition on my part, I believe that she was watching the youngsters play basketball and didn't see the last step, and she fell. She got up, got the item out of her car, came back into the residence, and then notified me that she had fallen. I immediately asked if she needed an ambulance, asked what she needed. She said she didn't know. And after about 45 minutes, she said that she was going to seek medical attention. I asked if she needed an ambulance. Again, she said no. She was driven to the medical facility by her, I believe, husband. And that was actually the last time that I saw her. I notified Airbnb right away that there had been someone who had fallen, and they were seeking medical attention. They kind of took it out of my hands a little bit at that point, although I did get a few text messages from her, let me know that someone would follow up with me, which they did. It was not Airbnb that followed up with me. It was a company that works on their behalf called Crawford and Company. And they contacted me within 2 weeks, asked to come out. They wanted to look at the property. They wanted to take pictures, which we did. They came out actually a total of 3 times over the entirety of the process, and took, they came out, Crawford and Company came out. They sent out another subcontractor, We Go Look, I believe was the name. They measured the distance between the steps. They asked for plat maps of what was city property, because it was at the very end of the walkway, right where the car would be on the street. So she fell on my property and landed on city property. So they asked lots of questions. It took a lot of time. And about 1.5 years into it, I was served with papers that I was being sued civilly for compensatory damages. I notified Crawford, which they had told me to do if I received any communication. So I got them the documents right away. Airbnb did assign counsel on my behalf, and I was not any part of the discussions. It was really interesting. Every once in a while I would get an email asking for a few more details, confirming a few things here or there. Did this happen? Did this not happen? Asking me for video footage. I did have Nest cameras set up because it was the front of the property. So looking at the street and looking at the doorway. So I was very fortunate to have that. They came out to look at the lighting on the street to make sure that my house wasn't darker than any of the other residences on the street. Was it appropriately lit? All of those types of things. And then about 2 weeks ago, it finally, after 3 years, resolved.
Well, first of all, congratulations that you made it through those 3 years, and with the settlement. So I can imagine it must be feel like a relief to be done with this.
It does. When I was talking with some of the Strapa students on our call this week, I realized it was the first time really that I verbalized it and talked about it outside of family and friends. Because it was such a protracted process, there were times when it was incredibly stressful and I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep, and I probably let it get to me even more than it should have. But it took so long that I would go months and months without hearing anything and having great experiences with our Airbnb guests and all of our residences. And then I'd see an email come up with the attorney's name or the opposing counsel's name or something like that. And I would just be, just a drop, just drop my stomach. It was very, very nerve-wracking, I guess. As I mentioned earlier, I was very fortunate that we had cameras. I was very fortunate that I had specific short-term rental insurance on the property, which I would strongly encourage everyone to do. It is more expensive than standard insurance, but it will cover you. And if something like this happens, you at least can provide proof of appropriate insurance. It was not tendered to my insurance, so I was fortunate with that as well. It was all handled under the Airbnb host guarantee. Or host protection, sorry, host guarantee, I think is the resolution center, but host protection. So those things helped me sleep a little bit better at night. But when you get the knock on your door that, you've been served, I don't think there's anything that can really make you feel too much better about it.
Yeah, that must be an absolute nightmare. So there's a lot of questions come to mind, but the first question that comes to mind is like, what was the ground of the accusation from the Airbnb guest? Because to me, it sounds like, you couldn't really have done anything about it.
I would agree with that.
I feel like it's not your fault.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Jasper. It was for property damage and personal injury. It was, let me see, as I flip through all of my paperwork here, negligence, willful failure to warn, dangerous condition of public property, and allegations about other defendants were the specific things outlined, which of course, just as I read them, I just was so sick to my stomach. And I'm like, failure to warn, negligence of property. I could, how, you just start, I became so, defensive. I think I stormed all through my house. Just, how could this happen? This is outrageous. And at the end of the day, there's only so many boxes they can check when you're going to be sued. And so the boxes that they could check got checked. And then you go about providing, you hire someone, or in this case, Airbnb provided someone to represent me, and you go about providing the information to counter that. And that's really the best that you can do. It was nothing like you see on television. There was no dramatic courtroom drama. It was a very process-oriented, methodical path that it took of question and answer, and provide and wait for questions and provide more information, and respond and be responded to, and hope that it comes out in your favor. And then make sure you're doing everything you can to protect yourself on all your other residences.
Right. Yeah. I'm just trying to think, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, put a warning sign at every step or something?
Well, You don't have to, but I have. And I already had lighting on every step, like integrated lighting that our landscape developer had put in the property, that, the up lighting on each of the, integrated into a step. And I didn't have any steps like where you would step 1, 2, 3 steps. It was literally come out the front door, take a step down, walk about 10, I have a long entryway, walk about 10 yards, take a step down. And each step was only, I want to say, shouldn't say exactly 6 inches, maybe might have been 5.5 inches. But I have now, it's ugly, but I have the reflective yellow caution tape on each step, because apparently lighting wasn't enough. So I don't think it would have prevented it, because she was walking down the steps, not up the steps. So I don't think it would have prevented it, but it could prevent someone from falling coming up next time. So the city confirmed that the lights on the street were all, the exact same and what they should be. And the same throughout I don't live in a tract, I live in an older neighborhood, or this home's in an older neighborhood. And it wasn't any different than any other home in the surrounding area. So to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I don't know what else we could have done. I'm very aware of how litigious California is. As a host, it's always been something I've been nervous about and hoped would never happen. So I think I've always erred on the side of caution, to the point that others might say paranoia, but sometimes it just, the cards don't fall in your direction.
And do you think it was the Airbnb guest who came up with all these accusations, or was it the lawyer that she hired?
I don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't know. Like I said, when she left the residence that evening to go seek medical attention, I did not see or speak to her after that. There was nothing, there was never an aggressive conversation between the two of us. There was never anything, I won't say negative, because she obviously said that she was hurt. But we didn't have any type of encounter at all. It was, what can I do for you? What can I provide for you? What would you like? And then obviously notifying the platform as quickly as possible, which isn't always easy to get through to them.
So it sounds like Airbnb kind of handled the whole case for you. Are you happy with how Airbnb handled the situation?
That's kind of a two-part question for me. Once Airbnb turned it over to, in this case, they probably have several, but for me, it was Crawford and Company. I never spoke to Airbnb about it. In fact, I only talked to Airbnb about it one time, on the night that it happened, when I reported it. After that, if you host on Airbnb, you're probably very familiar. You can reach out to them, but if you call to follow up, you never talk to the same person twice. They can never transfer you to the part, that's either your trust and safety department, or it's legal compliance, or it's, whatever the case may be. And they say, someone from that department will reach out to you. I, of course, panicked when I was served, and I called them again, and they said, we can't transfer you to anyone. We can have someone reach out to you. No one reached out to me. So was I happy? I'm happy with the outcome, for sure. Absolutely. Was I happy with how it was handled? There's not a number to call. There's not a point of contact. There's not a person. So I think that's maybe one area that's open for improvement, because it's a scary and unsettling. Scary might be too strong a word for some people, but it's an unsettling experience. And I think if there were a singular point of contact, or someone with whom you could speak, as opposed to just the general 800 number, which is all that I knew of, I would have felt better. Crawford and Company was reachable at times. They weren't uber responsive, but they did what they needed to do. When it was tendered to an attorney that was representing me, they were very responsive at every turn. Any question I had, and I tried to be responsive to them, because there were things that they needed from me. They're getting a case file, and they've got to try and put together a response based on that. So I tried to be responsive to them, but I would say they were responsive to me. So in short, I'm happy with the outcome. I would hope that for hosts, at some point, there's a a process by which they can have some feedback or a go-to entity or person during a really scary time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what are some of the learning lessons from this whole process?
I probably sound like a broken record. All of our assets, my assets, are in a trust. The company is held in an LLC. Limiting your personal liability, I think, is absolutely critical if you're going to be doing probably anything, but most assuredly short-term rentals in California, limiting your personal liability. Have the things in place that make you a responsible host, that may be unrelated to your case. For example, one of the questions was, what do you do to ensure that you are not a negligent host? So talking about having noise aware, having party squasher, having fresh air, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's a great company, by the way. Having fresh air, having Nest Cam, having a history of, my, what do you call it? My smart lock records guests as they, as they enter their code. And I don't ever have the same code. I won't say never, but the code is always set to the last 4 digits of the guest's cell phone number in their Airbnb profile. So it's easy for them to remember and easy for me to forget, which is perfect. Being able to provide all of those things to create or reinforce the perception that what you do well, you do responsibly, you do professionally. Do as I say, not as I do. Try not to be emotionally activated by things. Give yourself time to process the emotion of it before you respond, so that you're responding to the logics rather than the logic rather than the emotion. And by all means, where it's legal to do so, have security footage. That was a godsend for me.
Yeah, because my next question would be, what are some things that if you wouldn't have had them could potentially have changed the outcome of the case, do you think?
I think, I don't know for certain about short-term rental insurance because it didn't hit my insurance. It was done through Airbnb. I was asked to provide it. I think it could have been a problem if I didn't. If I were not structured as an LLC and limited my personal liability, I think that could have had strongly negative impact for me. I am without a doubt certain that if I did not have security camera footage that I could provide that was time stamped, here's her entering the first time, here's her exiting the second time, here's her entering the third time, here's her exiting the fourth time, here's her navigating the steps successfully 3 times, being aware of where they are and how to navigate them, and doing so successfully and without injury multiple times before this happened, I think was important, and I think could have changed the outcome.
Got it. So that's important, the security cameras, and we're only allowed to have those facing public
areas.
Yeah.
That actually came up with the Strappa group because someone brought up the really good point, and I hadn't even thought about it, because you're wrapped up and you have blinders on with what's happening with you, about what if this had happened in the backyard, getting out of a hot tub or something like that. You can't have cameras in a backyard. It's when someone rents the space, they are renting private space, and you cannot have cameras in private space. It's the same as having it in a bedroom. So to your, that's, I guess, another answer to your question. The fact that it happened in my front yard was very fortuitous for me.
What would your advice be to hosts who are listening right now and they're thinking, okay, what can I do now to prepare myself in case this would happen to me?
How you're structured so that someone can't sue you and take everything you have, I think is, whether you have a little or whether you have a lot, I think is critical. Doing everything you can so that in the eventuality that this hits you, unfortunately, you don't lay your head on the pillow at night and think, oh, if only I had gotten that insurance, if only I had ordered that camera on Black Friday and gotten it installed. If only I had done the Nest Aware subscription that records for 30 days, whatever those cases may be. It's hard, I think, as a host, and I'm not someone who has hundreds of units, hopefully someday, but when you're looking at all of your costs and they add up, you've got your tech stack and you've got your subscriptions and you've got your Nestaware subscription and your marijuana monitor subscription, all those things add up and they're a cost of doing business. And of course, as you look at your P&L and what your net operating income is going to be, you're looking at ways to save money and increase your margins. I'm glad I didn't compress them to the point that it came back to bite me in the ass.
Yeah, for
Sorry.
sure.
Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. We'll just have to flag this episode as explicit language.
Put it after one of Julie's and we'll be fine.
Yeah, well, actually, yes, I'm actually recording a podcast with Julie after
all right,
this.
She'll outswear me, I hope.
For those who are listening and who don't know who Julie is our Australian head coach of the Legends X program, and
amazing lady.
She's awesome, and she's really, really funny, and she likes to swear.
So do I.
Awesome. So let me see what else did I want to ask you? I think we've covered pretty much everything. Is there anything else you think we should share that we haven't touched on yet?
A couple of things that we talked about in our group call earlier this week were, you don't know, obviously, sorry, short-term rental insurance. There are several out there and they are more expensive. I had looked at 3 or 4 different ones before I bound the policy, and I don't have the same one on all of our properties. I know you guys recommend Proper, and I have worked with them. CBiz is another one. Berkshire Hathaway, which is a Warren Buffett company, and he's heavily invested in Airbnb, has Berkshire Hathaway Guard Insurance. And then for hosts who may have properties that have homeowners, if you're managing on behalf of someone that's military, USAA will also issue a rider to an existing homeowners insurance policy for STR.
Got it. Yeah, you were very happy with Berkshire.
I have been. There's one thing that I would not caution, but be sure that you're doing. When I got the 4 quotes and was laying them all out, you immediately flip to the last page and look at, what is the cost of the policy? What is the cost of the policy? And there were some differences in there. But equally, if not more so important, was making sure that you're comparing apples to apples coverage. Because if you look at this one and it's, X amount of dollars and the other one's 20% higher, make sure that that one that you have is providing the same coverage limits that the higher priced one is. So once I did that, I initially looked at all the prices, then went back and looked at all the coverage levels, and then had the quotes adjusted so that we were comparing apples to apples so that everyone was providing equivalent coverage. Then I was in a position to make, in conjunction with our homeowners, for the ones that either I don't own or master lease, but the ones that I co-host or manage, work in conjunction with your homeowners to make sure that you have the right policy in place. And I don't know that there necessarily is one right one. Yes, I've been happy with Berkshire Hathaway. I've also used CBiz and been happy with them. I used Proper and was happy with them. And I will say that I think if you have the opportunity to use USAA, and not everyone does because it's military or dependents or descendants of military, it's a good way to go.
Got it. And then as far as the closure of the case, so Airbnb settled with your guest, and that's all confidential information, right? You can share. Yes. Exactly. Mm-hmm. But basically what happened is Airbnb paid some money to the guest, and now the case is closed.
The case is closed, and it prohibits any further pursuit of claims.
Awesome. So she can't sue you anymore.
I hope not. I hope not.
That's good.
My understanding.
Awesome. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for sharing your story on this podcast. And I'm so happy for you that I love your podcast. Yeah, I'm so happy for you that you've gone through that you're done with it.
Me too.
Yeah.
It kind of, obviously it feels like a weight is lifted off of you. And it kind of, for me, 3 things kind of coalesced all at the same time, which was this thing resolving, the situation resolving, and Los Angeles County moving into a less restrictive tier, and the city of Long Beach finalizing their STR regulations. So for us with Swag, we've kind of been in a period of stasis, just kind of waiting to see how all these things are going to play out. And fortunately, I think we've turned a corner. I hope that we have. I love that this city is, all the cities around us have outlawed or banned STRs. I love that the city of Long Beach is saying, bring in your tourists, bring in your family. Yes, of course they're getting, 13% transient occupancy tax for it, which is millions of dollars to this city. And I'm well aware of that. I was active in pushing legislation through, but that they're embracing it. They're regulating it, which I think is important. I am absolutely a proponent of regulation, but they've embraced it. And so many around us haven't. And I think that's wonderful for those of us who are committed to rent responsibly and a sustainable tourism landscape for short-term rentals.
Sweet. So if you're listening to this podcast right now and you want to go to Disneyland, it opens up at the end of April. And if you want to stay with Tamara, you go to swaghospitality.com. There where you can find her listings. And if you own a property in Long Beach and you want to make a lot of money, because Tamara does a great job. You were booked 90% through COVID. That's
we were
impressive.
really fortunate. We were
That's
really
impressive.
fortunate. I have a great team. I do. They're super responsive. The hospitality experience, I think, is really, really solid. We both have decorating backgrounds. So I think the places look, I'm obviously biased, but I think the places look pretty exceptional. And we keep them that way. We do a lot of work with hosts in Long Beach and actually up in LA and a couple in back east for helping with decorating. Photos are everything. I mean, people are only booking off your first, what they can see at the time, and Wi-Fi speed, as you always tell us, which we have good Wi-Fi speed. So I think we've been really, really fortunate. I'm lucky to have great people that I work with, and we're looking forward to growing it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Tamara, thanks again. And for listeners, thank you for listening. And we'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.